Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really, really important for, well, any cause you care about, how nonprofits stay financially stable.
Hmm.
We're diving into diversified funding. Because, let's be honest, if an organization just relies on one or two ways to get money,
Yeah, that can be really shaky ground.
exactly, it leaves them vulnerable. So today, our mission is to figure out how building a stronger financial base isn't just, a good idea. It's essential.
Right.
And we want to give you some practical ideas, maybe some surprising facts too, that anyone involved in nonprofits or just curious can actually use.
Absolutely. We've looked at some really interesting stuff that really highlights how getting income from different places isn't just nice, it's, well, fundamental for staying afloat long term.
Okay.
We want to make it clear why it's so vital and maybe give some steps people can actually take, no matter how big or small their organization is.
Okay, let's get straight into it then. Why is it such a big deal for a nonprofit to, actively try and get funding from different places? What's the real danger if they pin all their hopes on just one or two sources?
Well, the biggest risk, really, is just not being resilient.
Hmm.
Think about it. Say an organization gets most of its money from one government grant.
Okay.
Politics change, budgets get cut, and suddenly, bam, their main funding is gone overnight.
Wow, yeah.
Or, maybe they rely heavily on a few big donors. If those people's situations change or they decide to support something else.
Instant crisis.
Exactly. It's about avoiding that single point where everything could just fall apart. It puts the whole mission at risk.
Right, that classic don't put all your eggs in one basket thing, but yeah, the stakes are much higher here.
Hmm.
So let's flip that. What are the clear upsides when a nonprofit does work to bring money in from different directions? What's the payoff?
Oh, the benefits are huge. First off, it gives them stability.
Stability.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like a financial safety net. If one income stream dips, maybe a grant doesn't come through, the others can sort of cushion the blow, keep things running.
Okay, so it smooths out the bumps.
Exactly.
Right.
Second, it gives them flexibility. Often, if you're not relying so heavily on one specific funder, there are fewer strings attached to the money.
Ah, right. Less restriction on how they use it.
Precisely. So they can adapt more quickly, respond to what the community actually needs right now. And finally, it builds independence.
Independence.
How so? Well, if your support comes from a wider base, no single funder has too much influence.
Gotcha.
So the organization can really stay true to its mission, its values, without feeling pressured. So it's not just about more money, it's about having more control over your own destiny?
That makes total sense. It's like future-proofing the organization.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get practical. What are some real-world ways a nonprofit can actually do this? Our research pointed to some interesting tactics.
Definitely. One really big area is just expanding donor networks. So traditionally, maybe a nonprofit mostly looks for support in its own town or city.
Right, locally.
But there's a massive opportunity now to connect with donors nationally, even internationally.
Ah, yeah, with the internet and everything.
Exactly. That doesn't just mean potentially more money. It also means you're less tied to the ups and downs of just one local economy.
That's a great point.
Mm.
So how do they tap into that wider audience?
Well, peer-to-peer fundraising is really powerful.
How does that work again?
You basically empower your current supporters to set up their own little fundraising pages and ask their friends and family.
Ah, leveraging their networks.
Right. It brings in new donors you might never have reached. Plus, it gets people more involved, builds that community feeling. And it's also really important to get a mix of donation sizes.
Not just chasing the big fish.
Exactly. Those huge gifts are fantastic, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But you need a solid base of smaller, regular donations, too. That builds a really stable foundation. Every little bit adds up.
And this figure really jumped out at me from the sources. Nonprofits that started accepting non-cash gifts, things like stocks, right?
Yeah, securities, that kind of thing.
They grew by an incredible 66% over 5 years. 66. Compare that to just 11% growth for groups only taking cash.
It's a massive difference, isn't it?
Huge. I mean, the takeaway seems crystal clear. If you only take cash, you're actively limiting your growth.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking beyond cash isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's like core to growing.
Absolutely. And that statistic really highlights why exploring new fundraising methods is so key, like accepting stock donations.
Right.
That just opens up a completely different way for people to give. Lots of people have assets, like stocks that have gone up in value, that they might actually prefer to donate instead of cash.
Interesting tax implications there, maybe, for the donor.
Potentially, yeah. But the point is offering different ways for people to support you, making it easy.
That's really smart, making giving fit different people's situations.
Yeah.
What other kinds of fundraising methods should nonprofits be thinking about?
Well, launching monthly giving programs is incredibly effective.
Recurring donations.
Exactly. They give you a predictable income stream you can rely on. And the research we saw suggested that monthly donors, on average, give something like 42% more over the year than people who just give once.
42% more. Wow. So it's about building that ongoing relationship.
It really is. And then there are corporate partnerships.
Okay, like sponsorships.
That's part of it. Sponsorships for events or programs, but also things like matching gift programs where a company matches donations their employees make.
Oh yeah, those are great. Free money, almost.
Pretty much. These partnerships bring in money, sure, but they also build community ties and raise the nonprofit's profile.
We actually found a quote from Todd Heistand that kind of frames this strategically. He said something like, at some point you hit a max if all you're doing is individual donor dollars.
Right. There's a limit.
But there's also conversations around where the revenue stream's coming from. So the question is, how are we going to start building a roadmap to get to impact?
Exactly. It's about thinking bigger. How does the money strategy actually fuel the mission, the impact you want to have?
Taking that step back to see the whole financial picture.
Yes, it's about having a solid plan for financial sustainability that directly helps you do more good. And, technology is a huge part of making all this work.
Ah, okay, because juggling all these different streams sounds complicated.
It can be, yeah. But platforms like Help You Sponsor, which came up in our sources, have tools built specifically to help nonprofits manage these different income types.
So how does the tech actually help? What does it do?
Well, it makes things way more efficient. Think automated donation tracking.
Okay, so it just logs everything automatically.
Pretty much. Pulls in data from different payment systems, generates reports, takes a huge load off. Then there's donor relationship management CRM tools.
Right. Keeping track of donors.
Yeah, tracking their history, letting you personalize communication, really nurture those relationships, and also campaign performance tracking.
So you can see what's working and what's not.
Exactly. Real-time data on your fundraising efforts, so you can tweak things as you go, based on what the numbers are telling you.
That does sound like it would make things much more manageable. And, another stat that stood out was that apparently almost 90% of donations come from just 12% of donors.
Yeah, that's a common finding. The Pareto principle in action.
It really shows how vital it is to focus on those key supporters. And tech must be essential for doing that well.
Precisely. Knowing who your core supporters are lets you focus your energy effectively. But beyond tech, we shouldn't forget about good old-fashioned collaboration.
Ah, working together.
Yeah, collaborating locally with other organizations, even businesses, can bring huge benefits.
We saw some good examples of that, didn't we? Like the North Texas Food Bank working with UNT Dallas.
Yes, that was a great one. Sharing resources. UNT Dallas had the space and infrastructure.
So the food bank could set up a mobile distribution hub there.
Right. And they delivered over 1 million pounds of food that way.
Yeah.
It's about finding those synergies, maybe sharing costs or expertise.
Makes sense. And collaborating with businesses, too, like communities and schools of San Antonio and HEB with their Stuff the Bus drive.
Another perfect example, HEB helped them collect tons of school supplies, reached way more people in the community than they could have alone.
So working together really can boost impact and bring in resources you wouldn't get otherwise. And that applies to working with community leaders, too.
Absolutely. Building relationships with influential people, business leaders, local officials can open doors to funding, maybe help smooth the way for programs.
How do you do that effectively?
Showing up at local events, joining business groups, just being visible and making connections. Finding people who believe in your cause and can advocate for you.
Like that City Year and Timberland partnership example.
Yeah, where Timberland employees volunteered their time, used their skills to fix up facilities for Inwood House. That's a win-win. Good for the community, good for employee morale at Timberland.
And our sources even mentioned some best practices for setting these partnerships up properly.
Right, like doing your homework. A SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for both partners.
Makes sense. Know what everyone brings to the table.
Researching potential partners thoroughly, getting things down and writing clear agreements about who does what, and then checking in regularly to make sure it's still working.
So it's not just casual, it needs a structured approach. And you mentioned Help You Sponsor could help track these partnerships too. Back to the tech.
Exactly. Okay, so you've done all this, you've got different income streams coming in. Now you absolutely need the right tools to manage them properly.
Right. keeping track of it all.
Yeah, our research really stressed how important solid money management is.
What does that involve? What are the key pieces? Because I imagine it gets complex fast.
Modern accounting software is pretty much essential.
Okay.
It makes reporting easier, helps make sure money gets allocated to the right place, especially if you have restricted grants, and cuts down on errors.
Fewer mistakes, better tracking.
Exactly. The sources highlighted things like automated reports for quick financial snapshots, fund tracking to see where money from different streams is going.
So you know if that grant money is being spent correctly.
Right. Also, budget management tools, obviously, and specific grant monitoring features to handle compliance and reporting for grants. It
Yeah.
gives you a clear picture.
We saw that quote from a fiscal director at a healthcare nonprofit, didn't we? Saying how these tools let them manage multiple grants, track time, costs, everything really precisely.
Yeah, it really shows the practical difference it makes. And once you have that clear internal picture, it's so important to share it, sharing results with donors.
Transparency builds trust, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's crucial for keeping donors engaged and accountable. Showing them the impact their money is having encourages them to keep giving. And a key part of that is showing your revenue streams visually in reports.
So using charts and graphs make it easy to understand.
Exactly. Show clearly where the money's coming from, how it's being used for the mission, and maybe even highlighting if one source makes up more than, say, 25% of your income.
Why do that?
It subtly reinforces the need for diversification, shows you're aware of potential risks and working on resilience. Regular updates, maybe automated ones, keep donors in the loop. And ultimately, all this financial strategy needs to connect back to meeting community needs.
Right. It's all got to serve the mission.
Yes, and tools like Help You Sponsor apparently have features for tracking commitments and evaluating program impact, linking the money to the outcomes.
That's key, showing the connection between the donation and the difference it makes. Our sources had tips for managing resources effectively too, didn't they?
They did. Things like tying spending directly to your impact metrics, tracking program cost by funding source so you know the true cost.
So you know how much that specific program costs to run using that particular grant.
Precisely. Keeping detailed records and using automated systems to avoid, simple coding errors that can mess up your whole financial picture.
Makes sense. Good financial management isn't just about the numbers. It's about making the mission possible. Okay, so you have these diverse streams, you're managing them. How do you know if it's actually working? How do you track progress?
Great question. That brings us to tracking progress with multiple funding sources. Our research dug into this too.
What are the main things, the key metrics a nonprofit should watch? It feels like there could be so many numbers.
There are a few really critical ones. The donor retention rate is huge.
How many donors stick with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It tells you a lot about donor satisfaction and how well you're engaging them. Then there's the cost to raise a dollar.
How much you spend to bring in each dollar of donation.
Exactly. Measures fundraising efficiency. The program efficiency ratio is important too. What percentage of your spending goes directly to programs versus overhead or fundraising?
Okay. Donors like to see that number high.
Generally, yes. And the current ratio, basically, can you cover your short-term bills? It's a basic financial health check. But it's really important to remember benchmarks vary. What's good for one type of nonprofit might be different for another.
Right. Context matters. Are there other indicators for digging a bit deeper?
Definitely. You can look at the revenue growth rate for each specific funding stream.
Yeah.
See which ones are growing, which are flatlining.
Compare the different sources.
Yes. Track the average gift size, see if it's going up or down, maybe different for different campaigns. Calculate your cost per donor acquisition. How much does it cost to get a new donor through different channels?
Okay. Is online cheaper than direct mail, for example?
Right. And the unrestricted net assets ratio.
Oh.
That basically shows how much financial flexibility you have, how much money isn't tied to specific projects.
So it's kind of a mix, measuring how well your fundraising is working, but also the overall financial health and wiggle room of the organization.
Exactly. Now, once you have this data, how do you actually use it to get better? It's not enough just to track numbers, is it?
Right. You have to do something with them.
Absolutely. First step. Regular metric reviews. Look at the data monthly, or at least quarterly. Use those automated reports to spot trends or problems early.
Catch things before they become big issues.
Exactly. Then compare your funding sources. Which ones are really pulling their weight? Which ones are maybe costing more to maintain than they bring in? Where should you focus more energy?
Makes sense. Double down on what works.
or figure out why something isn't working, and crucially, engage your stakeholders. Share this data clearly, honestly, with your board, your key donors, even your staff.
Show them you're on top of things.
Yes, it builds incredible trust and keeps everyone accountable when you use data to explain your progress and challenges.
That makes perfect sense. Showing stakeholders you're not just asking for money, but you're managing it carefully and tracking the results. So based on that data, how do you actually fine-tune things?
Well, you systematically reassess the streams that aren't performing well. Why aren't they growing? You set clear, measurable goals for improvement for each stream.
Okay, specific targets.
Right. You adjust your tactics based on that efficiency data, maybe shift resources from a high-cost fundraising channel to a lower-cost one, and you keep a really close eye on program spending to make sure you're maximizing impact and keeping donors happy.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. So as we wrap up, what's the single biggest takeaway for nonprofits looking for that long-term financial strength?
I think the core message is that real, lasting financial health, that resilience we talked about, it demands a proactive, strategic, and just ongoing effort to bring in money from lots of different places.
It's not a one-and-done thing.
Not at all. And remember, that data point, just relying on cash donations limits growth so much compared to embracing other ways people can give.
Yeah.
That 11% versus 66% growth is pretty stark.
Yeah, that really sticks with you. And it felt like our sources pointed to three key things needed to build that strong foundation. First, strategic planning, really using data to see where you are and line up your resources with your goals. Second, community collaboration, actively building those partnerships to get more support and reach more people.
Crucial.
And third, effective tracking, having good systems, being transparent with your reporting.
Exactly right. Diversifying your income isn't a project you finish. It's a constant process. You have to keep looking at it, tweaking things, adapting. That's how you build the resilience to keep fulfilling your mission year after year.
So a final thought for everyone listening, thinking about your own organization or maybe one you support in your community, what's just one new way of bringing in funding that seems realistic to maybe explore in the next year? It starts with that one step. Thanks for diving deep with us today.